Documented 187 is a true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The city is still visible behind you as you step off of the road and onto a narrow path through the dusty field, following a man who says he can lead you to a job. A folder is tucked beneath his arm, and he speaks with the easy confidence of someone who has done this before. He describes a real opportunity, a way forward, and when help arrives at exactly the right moment, doubt can become easy to ignore. When he gestures farther down the path and says, "It won't take long," you follow. With each step, the noise of the city begins to thin. Traffic fades. Voices disappear. The path leads past a bottle half buried in the dirt, a rusted frame, and a tangle of wire. Soon, the only footsteps you hear are yours and his. The fell stretches open around you, wide and empty, and the folder beneath his arm starts to feel like bait. Then he steps closer. Something in his voice shifts. The warmth drains away. This was never about a job. By the time the wind moves through the field again, the folder is closed. South Africa, mid-1900s. The country was barely a year into democracy. In 1994, South Africans had voted in the first democratic election open to citizens of all races, ending apartheid rule. But the inequalities built over decades did not disappear with one election. Unemployment remained high, and for many families, a legitimate job offer could mean food on the table, school fees paid, rent covered, or one less impossible choice at the end of the month. West of Pretoria was Atteridgeville, a township where opportunity could still feel just out of reach. East of Johannesburg, Boksburg stretched across an industrial landscape shaped by mines and factories. Cleveland was an eastern suburb of Johannesburg, where developed neighborhoods met stretches of open land that offered distance and concealment. On a map, the locations were separated by miles. In the headlines, their initials would eventually be joined: Atteridgeville, Boksburg, Cleveland. A, B, C. Between 1994 and 1995, women began disappearing across Gauteng. Many were looking for work and had been approached about positions connected to a supposed organization called Youth Against Human Abuse. The name sounded legitimate, and the offer gave them a reason to agree to a meeting. Bodies began appearing in the field around Atteridgeville, Boksburg, and Cleveland. As investigators compared the cases, the similarities became harder to ignore. The victims were women, many of them young and looking for work, and the promise of employment appeared repeatedly in the circumstances surrounding their disappearances. The locations eventually gave the case its name, the ABC Murders. Fear spread across Gauteng. President Nelson Mandela visited the Boksburg crime scene and appealed to the public for help as communities across Pretoria and Johannesburg searched for answers. The break came through Amelia Rapadile. Before she disappeared, she had arranged to meet a man named Mo-zis Sithole about a job. Investigators found her application and learned that Sithole was the person who had offered her the position. Another victim was later connected to him through a similar employment offer, giving police more than a shared pattern. They now had the same man linked to multiple women who had disappeared. Sithole became the focus of the investigation, but by the time police began searching for him, he had vanished. Investigators interviewed people who had seen him with women who later disappeared and looked more closely at the organization he claimed to represent. Mo-zis Sithole was born on November 17, 1964, in Veld near Boksburg. He was one of 5 children. After his father, Simon, died, his mother, Sophie, struggled with alcohol and became abusive toward the children. She eventually left them at a police station because she could no longer care for them. From there, they were sent to an orphanage in KwaZulu-Natal. Sithole later said the orphanage was also abusive. He stayed there for about 3 years before running away, then lived with his older brother Patrick for a time before working in the gold mines around Johannesburg. As an adult, he was described as handsome, articulate, and easy to talk to. He could come across as confident and respectable, which made it easier for people to trust him. In 1989, Sithole was convicted of rape and sent to prison. He later claimed the accusation had been false and blamed that conviction for the resentment he carried toward women. He was released in 1993, shortly before the disappearances began. Jury. Sithole blamed women for the years he believed had been taken from him. And maybe that explanation made sense in his mind. But did all of that resentment really begin with the one conviction? Or did it start much earlier? My guess would be with his mother. What do you think? On October 3rd, 1995, the Star newspaper received a call from a man claiming to be the killer. He knew details that had not been released publicly, and investigators believed the caller was Sithole. He continued speaking with journalist Tamsin De Beer over a series of calls, giving details that strengthened investigators' belief that they were speaking with the man responsible. Jury. Why do some criminals feel the need to taunt the press after committing crimes this heinous? Is part of them trying to get caught because they do not want to keep going? Or is it pure arrogance? Like, catch me if you can. Police used the calls alongside sightings and witness statements as they searched across Johannesburg They eventually located him near Benoni. When officers moved in, Sithole attacked one of them with an axe. Police shot him, then took him into custody after he was treated at a hospital under guard. Mo-zis Sithole's trial began on October 21st, 1996 in Pretoria. By then, prosecutors had charged him with 38 murders, 40 rapes, and 6 robberies. He pleaded not guilty to every count. The prosecution began with women who had survived earlier attacks by Sithole, some dating back to before his first rape conviction. Their testimony gave the court a first-hand account of his behavior with women long before police connected him to the murders. One of the most important pieces of evidence came on December 3, 1996, when prosecutors introduced a video recorded while Sithole was in custody. On it, he admitted to 29 murders and described how he approached and selected victims. He also claimed the killings began in July 1995, and he targeted women who reminded him of the woman he blamed for the rape conviction that had sent him to prison. The video immediately became a legal fight because it had been recorded inside of his jail cell. The defense challenged whether it could be used at all. The dispute stalled the trial for months before Justice David Crowley ruled on July 29, 1997, that the recording and Sithole's earlier statements were admissible. The prosecution rested on August 15th. When Sithole eventually took the stand, he denied involvement in the murders, despite statements already attributed to him and the evidence presented throughout the trial. On December 4th, 1997, after more than a year of testimony and legal arguments, Sithole was found guilty on 84 charges. Reading the verdict took approximately 3 hours, so sentencing was postponed until the following morning. On December 5th, Justice Crowley sentenced him to 50 years for each of the 38 murders, 12 years for each of the 40 rapes, and 5 years for each of the 6 robberies. The combined sentence was 2,410 years in prison. He would not become eligible for parole for at least 930 years. Crowley also stated that had South Africa's death penalty still been available, he would have imposed it. Although Sithole was convicted of 38 murders, investigators believe the actual number of victims could have been higher. Jury. This wasn't revenge. Sithole may have convinced himself that women were responsible for the years he believed had been taken from him, but the women he targeted had nothing to do with his conviction, his childhood, or whatever resentment he carried. People go through rejection, anger, grief, humiliation, all kinds of things. Most don't turn that pain into a reason to hurt people who had absolutely nothing to do with it. At some point, We have to stop calling it revenge and call it what it was, a choice. That's it. Join us next time as we learn about a woman who cashed in her family like paychecks. Until then, slide into the shadows.